when I did my Ulpan here, when I said I'm French and I said I'm Ashkenazi, everybody says it's impossible. There's no Ashkenazi in France. Even the teachers, they said, no. They all come from Morocco and Algerians. But they don't realize then the roots of the Jews in France are on one part from the southwest of France. They came from Spain.
Yes.
And on the other side, from the Rhine Valley. And they built the Jewish community of France, not the Moroccan and the Algerian. It's really new.
Welcome to 18 Jewish Foods, Culture and History in kosher bite-sized portions. This podcast tells the stories of iconic Jewish dishes, shedding light on the people who eat them. Here's your host, Joel Haber.
We have just finished the season of repentance on the Jewish calendar, and so in the spirit of that, I would like to make an apology. Last week, I missed releasing the episode. The holidays really got in the way of things, so I am a week behind. I hope you'll forgive me. The food I'm discussing on today's episode is Choucroute Garnie à la Juive. As I mentioned in episode 11, the episode about pizza ibraica, this is an example of a food that is called Jewish in its name. À la Juive means Jewish style. But while with pizza ibraica, it was called Hebraic because it was a food that was unique to the Jews, this one is called Jewish for another reason. Let me begin with what is Choucroute Garnie in general. It is a well-known dish from Alsace, the northeastern region in France, and choucroute itself means sauerkraut, essentially. You can even hear a similarity in the words choucroute, sauerkraut. What it is a fermented cabbage. The difference being that usually if you go to the supermarket and you buy sauerkraut, it's just soured with vinegar. Choucroute is genuinely fermented. It is lacto-fermented, meaning it is fermented on its own using salt alone. There's no added vinegar to it. But the dish Choucroute Garnie, which I believe means sort of a garnished choucroute, to make it you take the choucroute itself and you rinse it to remove some of the saltiness, and then you cook it together with numerous different kinds of preserved meats, pickled, smoked, sausages, etc., along with dry white wine, or beer as we'll hear in the interview later, potatoes, carrots, onions, and the whole thing is typically also flavored with, among other things, peppercorns and juniper berries. The origins of this dish, Choucroute Garnie, might be in a more simple preparation of a peasant type of food, but now it has become a very elaborate dish. There is no way that you could mistake Choucroute Garnie for a peasant food. But in the standard Choucroute Garnie, there is lots of pork, both in the types of charcuterie that are used, as well as in the plain meats, such as ham hocks, which are a common ingredient in Choucroute Garnie. The Jewish version, however, not surprisingly, uses only kosher meats, beef and sometimes goose. Joe Nathan, the cookbook author, says that Alsace is the only region of France that has traditions of both pork and beef charcuterie, Alsace being the old Ashkenazi Jewish heartland. I'm not certain that this is an accurate assertion, but we do know that across Europe in many locations, Jews had their own unique charcuterie traditions. So even if it's not the only place that made pork and beef charcuterie in France, the beef charcuterie is very closely tied to the Jews of Alsace. One of the primary meats that you would find in a Choucroute Garnie à la Juive is picklefleisch. Picklefleisch is a salted beef, pretty much the same thing as what an American would know as corned beef. Others would be a smoked beef, not quite what American pastrami is, and you can check my episode about that, as well as various kinds of beef sausages. And once Choucroute Garnie got adopted and adapted into a Jewish version, it became a real Jewish food. One of the ways we know is that some Jews would cook it overnight on Friday night for their Shabbat stew, the food that I discussed back in episode 3. Most importantly, I would say that Choucroute Garnie à la Juive is a perfect example of a food that we can identify as Jewish because our version is unique. To learn a little bit more about its place within the Alsatian Jewish cuisine, I spoke with Henri Lippmann. Henri is a chef who has worked in many restaurants and also had his own restaurants and catering business as well in both France and Switzerland. Though he originally comes from Lyon, which is not in the Alsace region, his entire family came from there, and that is the type of cooking that he grew up with. Currently, he lives in Israel, in Jerusalem, and though he is largely retired, he still caters internationally for various holiday retreats. I wanted to start with the Choucroute Garnie à la Juive, that is a Jewish version of Choucroute Garnie. Is there any difference between it and other Choucroute Garnie other than the fact that it does not use non-kosher meat?
Not really. Not really. But that makes a very, very big difference.
Of course.
we have to make it with a special charcuterie, what we have especially in Alsace. There is only 1 or 2 factories that are producing it. And usually the Jewish people, they make their own pickle flesh. That's a salted meat.
So of the different meats that are in there, the pickle flesh is typically homemade, not purchased.
Usually not.
But the other charcuterie would be purchased?
The smoked meat, you buy the smoked meat, but the pickle flesh, you do it at home, usually.
And same with the sausages you would buy as well?
Yes, sausages you have to buy. You have different kind of sausages. If you looked at the recipes, there's at least 8 kind of meat in the recipe, which is like the non-Jews are doing. They also put a lot of different kind of sausages beside the pork, and it's the same thing for the Jewish choucroute.
So one thing that surprised me about the recipe that you sent me is in the past when I've seen recipes for the Jewish Choucroute Garnie, it often has, in addition to those meats, it has goose, and you did not include goose.
Okay, that's what we would call a really royal choucroute.
Oh.
But there is a goose fat in the recipe. But sometime when I did some choucroute on special occasion, like for Pesach, you put some goose.
You're talking about the goose leg, yes?
The goose leg, sorry. Because instead to put the goose fat, you first put the goose leg on the onions and it's melted. And so you don't need any other fat.
So if I understand you, the Choucroute Garnie with the goose is not a standard option. That's more for a special version of it.
Yes. So in my wife's family, they used to do it at the end for Hanukkah.
When you went to culinary school in Strasbourg, did they teach you the kosher option? Did they teach you the Choucroute Garnie à la Juive, or at least even tell you about it?
No, not at all. However, the chairman of the school, which is very well known, his name was Mr. Joseph Kosher, which is very funny.
It is.
He wasn't Jewish at all, but he wrote with somebody else a recipe book for kosher recipes.
Huh. Did he have a choucroute recipe in there?
I don't think so. I have to check.
Yeah.
But I just noticed yesterday somebody on Facebook asked, we are going to visit Strasbourg. Is there a kosher restaurant? In which one could we eat a kosher choucroute? And everybody says, in kosher restaurants, they don't serve kosher choucroutes.
And that's been your experience as well?
On reservation, maybe some people will prepare kosher choucroutes, but no, people eat choucroute at home, not in the restaurants.
When you make it as a Shabbat food, meaning overnight cooked for Shabbat lunch, are there any changes that you make so that it will stand up better for the long cooking?
Not at all. The choucroute is always better the next day, always.
You don't need to put in any extra liquid to make sure that it stays moist or anything of that nature.
No. You put it on a low heating, You don't need anything else.
Now that you are living in Israel, at least part of the time, if not full time, do you find that you need to make any changes to your choucroute due to what's available?
Of course. I'm always doing my own pack of flesh because I'm bringing the special salt, nitrate de potassium,
The potassium nitrate.
because it's not available here. But I bring it every time I'm traveling and bring some, so I do my own pickled flesh.
I believe that's also what's known as saltpeter.
Oh, saltpeter, yes. And part of this, it's difficult to find out the real charcuterie, the real kind of meat. You can find something really similar, but, the thing is, everything has got the same taste, Each sausage should be a different taste.
So it's not the quality that you're looking for.
No, it's not. And actually, that's what I said. You need a real choucroute, which is from a special area from Alsace. And in Alsace, they had problems since a few years that people brought some cabbages, either from Poland, either from China, and they put it in the container and put choucroute from Alsace.
Mm.
So France decided to make an AOP, which is called an appellation of origin.
Mm-hmm.
And now there is a special label on it, and most of them are kosher.
Yeah, I made this dish once, and I got the choucroute in the chouk in Jerusalem in the market here. I know that it was French. I know that it was actually fermented and not made with vinegar. I was not careful enough to check whether it was from Alsace, and I can tell you that the wine I chose from Alsace.
So you can do choucroute with beer or with Riesling from Alsace.
Right.
I do prefer to do it with beer at the beginning, because beer gives some different flavor. Of course, if you do it for Pesach, you need to do it with wine, not with beer.
Are there other foods from Alsace that you're familiar with where the Jews have a different version of the dish than non-Jews?
Of course. The first one, it's called the Beckerhofer. It's a meat and potato hot pot.
Okay.
That the non-Jews used to do and put in the oven of the baker, but it's made with pork, beef, lamb, and butter, and pig's trotters. The common ingredient are potatoes, onion, carrots, leeks, and white wine. And the Jews, they only use beef, calf feet, and lamb, and even goose. You were talking about goose.
And what do they replace the butter with?
With goose fat, you see. And you put it in the oven overnight.
So the non-Jewish version of that dish, is that also cooked overnight or no?
Yes. It's also cooked a long time, maybe not overnight. They used to do it for a Sunday meal, for instance, but definitely a very long time, at least 5 or 6 hours. I just wanted to add, when I did my Ulpan here, when I said I'm French and I said I'm Ashkenazi, everybody says it's impossible. There's no Ashkenazi in France. Even the teachers, they said, no. They all come from Morocco and Algerians, but they don't realize then the roots of the Jews in France are on one part from the southwest of France. They came from Spain.
Yes.
And on the other side from the Rhine Valley, and they built the Jewish community of France, not the Moroccan and the Algerian. It's really new.
Other examples of foods where the Jewish version is unique. Also within the charcuterie field, I've mentioned in previous episodes that Italians made a goose prosciutto, which is clearly different than a pork prosciutto. Less obvious, but a similar idea, is American kosher-style hot dogs. Those took a recognized German sausage and altered it to be kosher or kosher style by replacing the pork with beef and also changing the spicing somewhat. Both of these are examples of Jewish foods that were altered to avoid pork. Indian Jews use coconut milk in curries that have meat in order to avoid the meat and dairy combination. And there are, among Jewish Russian borscht, there are two varieties. If it is a cold, meatless borscht, it may have sour cream inside as the primary souring agent. But when it is a hot, meaty borscht, typically the souring agent nowadays might be something like lemon juice, originally would have been Russell. Russell is a pickled or fermented beet. Both of these, avoiding pork and avoiding the mixture of dairy and meat products in a single food, are central food taboos within kosher cooking. And in various locations, the cooking medium was changed by Jews for one of those two reasons. In Spain, meat would often be fried in oil to avoid using a dairy product. And in the colder regions of Europe, where non-Jews would fry foods in lard, Jews fried in schmaltz, which is rendered poultry fat, but fat that came from kosher poultry, such as geese, ducks, or chickens. What we see is that this is an important category of Jewish foods, since they are clearly recognizable as different. In the same way that you could have a martini, which the classic version of the martini is made with gin and vermouth, you could make it with vodka, but then instead of calling it a martini, you have to call it a vodka martini. In the same way, you could have the original versions of these foods and the different modified Jewish version, sometimes identified clearly as such, by saying, for example, goose prosciutto or Choucroute Garnie à la Juive. Once again, I am still finalizing the details of the interview for episode 19, so I will once again sign off without providing the details of that episode. But again, I hope that you have a nice 2 weeks, and I will speak with you again very soon. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Got any questions or comments? Please feel free to email me at jewishfoodbook@gmail.com. Please listen, like, and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and I would truly appreciate it if you'd share this with other Jewish food lovers. The theme music you hear is Adir Hu Revisited by Rebbe Soul. Check him out wherever you stream music. And as always, until next time, I wish you b'tei avon.